But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
There we go. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 330, Uncle Sam's Shop of Horrors. I figured we could use a good title for the monster that we have created. So there you go. and a heck of a monster it is. So hopefully I've got everything set up right. It's all working the way that it should be working. I have been a little off my game. Something screwy is happening with Restream. It's showing me something I don't need, and I don't know how to get rid of it. So that's great. Crud, guys. Already the first thing has gone wrong. Like, literally, it just added this thing that I don't know where it came from. Let me see if I can fix it. I don't even know if it's Restream. I think it actually is Chrome. No, Brave. I don't have a reading list. How do I get rid of that? That's so weird. Anyway, sorry about that. Like, literally, I was gone from the computer for a minute, and that showed up for some ungodly reason. So there you go. Yeah, Richard Pierre, do not touch it. Doing so will crash the stream. Yeah, that would be our luck. So I'm just gonna open Restream chat in an entirely new tab, so I can still keep track of what you guys are telling me. Because otherwise I won't have any idea, because it's too small to read on my other screen. But yeah, there we go. Feels like a Time Bandits moment. Don't touch it! It's evil. Scary. But here we go into the wild blue, whatever it is. This is gonna be an offhand show a little bit, because we decided yesterday to move it a day ahead, and so I skipped my usual night before show prep because it was too late for me to do it.
They're doing something spooky tomorrow.
Yeah,
they're exactly what.
They're doing a different. Tonight we're talking about spooks, but tomorrow they're going to be doing something spookier. So there we go. Philip Williams, I'm singing that now. Little Shop of Horrors. Oh, Jesus.
I'm a mean green mother from outer space, and I'm... Never mind.
Yeah, unfortunately, our mean green mother is from right here. So, hello and welcome to HBR Talk 330, Uncle Sam's Shop of Horrors. Uncle Sham might be better. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren Brooks. And tonight we're going to talk more about, how feminism's paradoxical claims about girl power created this monster. We're still in the discussion here about how Ryan Routh is quite obviously a spook or a subcontractor, and I'm gonna contrast.
You mean that in terms of the deep state, right? You're not being racist.
No, I mean that in terms of the deep state, and people haven't forgotten, right? Because here for a long time, the CIA has been referred to as spooks. Like, that's not new. But just like the organization has been referred to as the shop, hence the title. But who's been feeding this plant? Who's, they've been giving it blood, but not their own. But who's been feeding this plant? And how did it get so big? So we're gonna take a look at some more from this this live stream, and then I'm gonna also kind of contrast, sort of sandwich in between an ad that we looked at yesterday, with what's going on here, and what's going on in the news in regard to that. And it's not the only thing that's going on in the news in regard to that, because I also could have done this with other countries that we are in conflict with, but it's quite an interesting juxtaposition when you think about what has been going on. But in the meantime, before we get into the thought-provoking discussions and provoke the thoughts, gotta remind you that Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of these ongoing thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences, both recent and long past, have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justatip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And in terms of social media, I've been provoking the thoughts quite a bit lately. So, yeah, if you can get banned for provoking the thoughts on X, I'm probably going to do it in the near future, because I've had some pretty harsh thoughts lately, and the thoughts have been pretty harshly responding to them. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if I get banned. This time I just flat out speculated that men might be better people in general than women because of differences in the way we treat other people. And
they are.
Yeah.
Where's the debate?
Yeah. Well, that's my opinion, that they are. Where's the debate? Because you look at the history of how men have done things versus how women have done things. It's no contest, right? But
I do not resemble that remark. I'm a terrible person.
But,
but men are generally better than me.
You might say that, but the rest of us think you're pretty great. But especially Lauren, but we all know she's biased. I'm a little biased too, though, because I love you both. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, Twitter, I don't know if they still have trust and safety, X, whatever, if they still have all those guys, but they might consider that sexist. So we'll find out. We'll find out if I can get away with saying that.
They got rid of those guys. It seems that way when Elon came in and just sweeped out a bunch of jobs there and reduced the workforce to 10% of what it was or something like that.
Yeah.
Some insane number. He just came in and cleared house, which is what needed to happen.
Yeah, I hope he did.
And I think what he did was then strengthen this oh my god, the community notes.
Yeah.
Holy shit, the community notes are on fire. You can tell the change because it's less trust and safety and more no lefties. This is an edited version of Kamala at McDonald's. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just they're on point every time I see one. Anyway, they're at least at the very least they are just straight down the middle of the line, right? And at least factual.
Yeah, they don't seem to be so much politically motivated as there somebody who's going, hey, something that you just said isn't the whole truth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's either not the truth, not the whole truth, or it's the truth
Nothing
plus
but
something else that makes it not the truth, right?
Yeah.
False framing. So it's good to see that.
It's Vox Day, as Elon keeps saying, which is something about the voice of the people is the voice of God. It's sort of, I want to call it true democracy, but then I remember that democracy was always a failed god. It's the true voice of the people. It's far, far more effective than the safety teams that they brought on in Google and such that were ran by Anita Sarkeesian and such. The experts, as I believe they're often called, as the people that are employed to be experts.
The harassment experts, yeah.
Yeah, they're only experts in fucking feminism and gender studies and that.
They're experts in using victimhood to harass other people.
Exactly.
Right.
And as much as you can't necessarily trust the voice of the people because the people are retarded, all you have to do is conglomerate as many voices as possible and make statistics of what they're saying, and that's how the community work. The community notes work.
Yeah.
They don't just leave it to a handful of feminist fucking losers at Twitter who get paid for doing fuck all day, apart from applying their bullshit education to the masses. You can do this with anything. Like, the government should have some equivalent of community notes, but they don't.
Gosh, yeah.
Despite calling themselves a democracy, they really don't do that. They rely on the experts.
They used to call it town hall meetings. You have the town hall meeting, the people tell you what they think of what you've been doing, and you're supposed to reform based on that as a government entity. And for some reason that's fallen by the wayside for most politicians. There's a few that are doing them. Some are pretending, and some are doing them for real. But there's still quite a bit of bullshit out there. So apparently it's not enough. So, but in the meantime, I think I have done everything I needed to do to get us started. And I went through and explained how to, if anybody wants to make comments that'll be read on the show, we got 3 ways to do it. You have your regular YouTube and Rumble tip jars, but we also have our Super Chow channel. And like I said, if you just go to honeybadgerbrigade.com and use that drop-down menu at the top of the page, you'll be able to find a link to that. So here we go. So last week we were talking a bit about the genocide that the U.S. federal bureaucracy hired terrorists to commit in Ukraine in 2014, and the implications of that in terms of who put this bureaucracy into place, who voted for this, because we have talked before about women's safety net addiction, right? But I want to continue a little bit more with what he has to say about this, and then this discussion is sort of going to get derailed because it's taking place right before, I believe, a town hall, and I think we're pretty close to where it gets derailed, and after he makes his one last point there, then we'll go on to look at that ad. So let's start with this.
Now, this is dirty work. After the 2014 coup in Ukraine, where we overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine, however you feel about it, I'm not
all right, why is it doing that?
Opining on foreign policy. I only care.
This is actually the setup I created to keep it from doing this.
About internet censorship. You just need to understand these dynamics to know what you're up against, because these are the same people who are responsible for global internet censorship. But the fact is you can also look at reporting about the mass, very strange, peculiar influx of Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters into Ukraine after the 2014 coup, when this was before the 2022 war broke out between Ukraine and Russia formally. The entire eastern half of Ukraine formally seceded from the Ukraine government, the newly installed U.S. Embassy in Kiev government. Remember, they installed that. That was the hot mic last week. The U.S. ambassador, that is the head of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, the exact place that Ryan Routh claimed that he was communicating with to get visas for these terrorists. That was Jeff Pyatt and Victoria Nuland, who was then the Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasian Affairs. So the regional head and the head of the embassy are caught on a hot mic installing the new president. The entire eastern half of the country says, actually, we didn't vote for this person. We're going to do our own thing. And then Crimea also voted to join the Russian Federation. But from 2014 to 2022, the CIA, the DOD, British intelligence, the British Ministry of Defense, and support from NATO partners like Canada, who has its own oil and gas interests in Ukraine as well, and some of these other supporting economic stakeholders, were supplying money, muscle, and running these recruiting networks to try to bring in militants from all around the world to help the upstart, scrappy Western Ukraine military, which was very fledgling at the time and needed to be capacity built. They needed to add bodies. And this is something that the CIA had been doing for a very long time. You can go back to the Chechnya Russia affair, where there was also these sort of, Islamic terrorist groups that were incubated by the CIA at that time. So these networks had been already very well established, but there was.
This guy talks a great deal of sense. I just can't get over how he has the exact same voice as Steve Shives.
I know it's kind of rough, but
it's throwing me off. It's like Steve Shives' soul was ejected into the body of somebody based.
Yeah, but in any case, or his voice was stolen by somebody based, which is even better. The thing that gets me about this is we've had this history. And this goes back a long time. Like we looked in earlier in this video and in previous shows at the CIA manipulated proxy war between the United States and Russia and Afghanistan in the 70s, right? That was very much the same as this. It's CIA interests, not necessarily USA interests, but CIA interests versus some other nation's national interests, and they're exploiting men who are desperate or men who are vulnerable because of social exclusion. And I don't know if men who are not suffering from social exclusion are fully understanding of just how vulnerable that makes men who have been socially excluded all of their lives from the time they were boys. But I grew up with a lot of those guys. When I was a high school kid, I was a nerd. I was a kind of a skater. I never really got good at it, so I can't really call myself one. But in my community, that was actually worse than being a nerd. And I was interested in it because I liked the monkey bars, right? And balancing on a skateboard is hard too, so I wanted to try it. It wasn't the same. But so I hung out with guys that were not only socially excluded, but they were harassed by other people for being socially excluded. They were excluded from the good parts of social engagement, but they had the bad parts inflicted upon them. So they were bullied. And there is a sense of desperation that happens where if you thought you could change your situation and gain an advantage that would stop the bullies from harassing you and result in some kind of inclusion, you wouldn't shy away from that, even if it was ugly or scary or dangerous or even morally questionable. In a lot of situations, a lot of people kind of give up on everything else if they think they can get that. And it's not necessarily something that, you have to approve of, compromising your morals to be able to understand why it happens. And knowing that it happens, and knowing that that's an exploitable mental state, especially when a person at that level of exclusion ends up in a state of depression, in a state of high anxiety, in a state of suicidality. Like, you end up in a position where things that normally you would think were hinky, things that would, set off your red flags and all that, sound okay to you. as long as the rewards sound good. And that's the condition people are in when the CIA finds them and exploits them. And it's almost always men. That's the condition people are in when organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS find them and exploit them. And that's almost always men. So, that's why I wanted to get into this, because what he's talking about is a worldwide pattern, a decades-long worldwide pattern of exploiting desperate, downtrodden, socially excluded men who may be suffering from mental health conditions that make them vulnerable to socially questionable and definitely morally reprehensible suggestions, and just exploiting them as cannon fodder and exploding messengers. And it's now coming out that they've been doing this all this time. All this time, Gen X grew up with this idea that we were a nation that was fighting the bad guys all over the world, right? The bad guys were the terrorists. And the whole time, our federal bureaucracy was contracting with them. Was creating these groups and then contracting with them. I couldn't think of anything scarier than this to present for Halloween. Like, this is not the country that I thought I lived in. Just, flat out, this is not the country that I thought I lived in. Until I started learning these things. So going on, maybe.
This mass influx of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters to go out and kill the Russian ethnic Ukrainians living in the eastern part of the state. And so they had been sourcing from these networks for a very long time. And there was a bad need to increase these bodies. This is way before the military draft that has basically taken every able-bodied and even some elderly folks in Ukraine to be conscripted into it. But even that's not enough, because they are technologically and militarily outgunned in many respects by the Russian military, and so they need more bodies. So Routh, in his own social media posts, on his own website, and we should pull that website up, by the way. I'll find the link for you in a second here, just because it's very interesting. But this,
I do want to just pause here for just a second, Mike.
Yeah,
I just want to let you just do a real quick preview here, show you where we're at with the Donald Trump. And
I don't care about that.
So I just sent this link to your producer if you want to pull it up on screen. Okay, you found this. Actually, let's just do this while it's on screen. Mm-hmm. So this is the website. Is it still live, by the way? Website. I archived it, but it's just it's very interesting. So this is, so first of all, this is a pretty slick website. This is, for a crazy person who has a hard time stringing together, 6 consecutive lucid sentences. If you scroll down to, I'll show you where it's right there. Scroll up a little bit, and then if you zoom in, we're gonna start now getting into the heart of what I suspect is going on here. If you scroll down a little bit, just to so that those 2 paragraphs are right there. Okay, and you'll see what it says is, this war is about moving our entire world together. All these sort of Getty images of Ukraine. But look at the bold. Do not call your home country embassy to seek approval to join the fight. Simply get on a plane and come to Ukraine and join us. Do not tell the government. This is a guy who was flagged by our own CIA in the government, flagged by our own Customs Border Patrol in the government, who is, as we'll see, back channeling with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, the exact place, the heart of darkness. Jeffrey Sachs is fond of making this joke, and he started making this joke before 2020. I guess it was a lot more funny then, that the only reason the U.S. had never experienced a coup in its country was because the U.S. is the only country on earth that doesn't have a U.S. embassy, right? Because you can't have an embassy in your own country. It's the only reason we have not had our government overthrown.
Mike,
right?
I got to tell you, we got Sarah Sanders on stage, so we have Sarah Sanders on stage.
Wait, we haven't gotten to the good part yet.
I know, Mike. We're here to for the town hall, and so I want to get to these answers. Please.
Okay, last thing on screen. Look at the second bold. Look at the second bold. It says, "Fighters, do not waste time with the embassy in your country, because don't worry, we're going to take care of it through the U.S. Embassy in Kiev." That's the State Department, Benny. This hits all three of the of the blob triangle. You have the CIA, the DOD, and the State Department. And I suspect that there were hundreds of people like Routh who were friends of friends. Somebody is working in the military thing. They say, okay, we just need people to spend 12 hours a day. Okay, all right. That's so much more to say, but I know we got to cut. Find me on X at Mike Ben Cyber. Follow me there for if you want to subscribe. I give weekly lectures multiple times a week, office hours, all that. Yeah, you want to learn, come to the quad.
So what he's just pointed out there is essentially that this is not unique, right? So everything that we just learned about Routh that was so shocking to learn about him and the organizations and the deep state being so entrenched in this exploitation of vulnerable men that the left hand doesn't know what the other left hand is doing. That's just one guy of potentially hundreds that are doing the same thing, that are all in some way or another connected, maybe subcontractors of subcontractors, or people that worked with subcontractors, people that still have connections within the network, within the shop, and so on, and are still getting paid through some degree of subcontracting. And that subcontracting, again, as we pointed out before, is how the military, how the CIA, how Homeland Security, and so on, the DHI, the investigators, the FBI, they all are able to claim plausible deniability because, well, it wasn't them. It was these rogue subcontractors, hundreds of them. Where did they ever get the idea? Where did these hundreds of subcontractors ever get the idea that this was what these agencies wanted them to do? It's almost like some kind of communication might have gone out somewhere along the line, right? Get us bodies. And when they say bodies, they never refer to men as people, right? You're not people, you're boots on the ground, right? You're not people, you're bodies. Not people, you're rifles.
And when they complain about
dead men walking,
they complain about women, they always talk about women's bodies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You notice that as well? It's not. It's
yep.
It's,
they don't
almost
care about women.
It's an issue. It's they see everyone as
bodies,
clumps of flesh that they can use.
Yeah, that they can exploit. And we've already looked at, in various ways, how the war in Ukraine is a giant money laundering operation for the United States. Our involvement there is entirely corrupt from the beginning, and our defense of our involvement there is essentially washing U.S. money that gets spent by the U.S. and comes back to the U.S. as money paid for weapons, but it comes back to contractors and investors who are part of the government, and it's laundered in men's blood. And as he pointed out, those men are as young as teenagers and as old as retirees. So that's what's basically going on. That is what the deep state monstrosity is doing. And during that time period, during that same time period, we are seeing actions that threaten war on 2-3 fronts in the Middle East, and also on 2 fronts in the Far East. And they can all reach our fronts, both coasts. They can all reach our southern border, and I wouldn't be surprised if they found a way to reach the northern border of the continental United States. And that would mean that they would go through your borders, Canadians. And so this is men all over the world that are affected by this. This isn't just our men. This isn't just their men. This is all men are our men. Because they're human. Right? But even if you think of yourself as separate by nation, it's not just our men. It's all men. So I'm going to go through that commercial now. So, everybody okay?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit congested. I'm hoping
no.
that I'm not coming down with something. Yeah,
I just thought I heard it sounded like you were crying. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, because the first time that I watched this, I did. And you have to understand, I grew up in a very patriotic household, in a very patriotic family. My biological grandfather on my dad's side of the family, I have a grandfather and a step-grandfather on that side of the family because my dad's parents were divorced. But my biological grandfather was in the Secret Service. I actually have a certificate from that. He fought in World War II. He had medals. You know, my uncles went to Vietnam and Korea. Y'all don't understand how this hit me.
Yeah.
Like, the country that I grew up in is not the country that I live in. And I haven't left. I'm still here. It's gone. It was never real. This is like discovering the door on the Truman Show and then realizing that the side you're on has the monsters. Okay, so I'm watching people trying to discuss we're not an hour behind. We're half a century behind. We should have figured this out a long time ago. But yeah. And yeah, we are hearing from both sides of the American political fence how this is men's fault and how men have to clean up this mess and men have to go to war for this other country because we started this mess, or men have to go to war for this other country because women there are in trouble. Right? Nothing about how men's lives matter.
Nope.
Nothing.
It's less about what they do say and more about what they don't say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's very much
obvious.
so. Yeah, and you have two sides to that. You have the side that hates men blatantly, openly, and vehemently. Calls them toxic. Religiously, yes. Calls masculinity toxic. Claims that that's not what they're saying, but then every characteristic they identify as masculine is a toxic characteristic, and they find a way to make toxic every characteristic that is masculine. Yes. So that's that side. And then you have the other side that's misguided, in that they have deified women, and they think that men owe women something as a population, and they think that men aren't holding up their end of the deal because women are mad, and men must have done something to cause that. But what are women doing? What are women mad about? They're not... The biggest issue that they're talking about right now is not the economy. Women are not yelling about how expensive things are at the grocery store when they make ads about who to vote for, right? They're not talking about, oh, I want you to vote for this candidate because I don't like the way that the school system is treating my children. It's about abortion. Mm-hmm. It's between pro-lifers and pro-choice. I hate the term pro-choice because they don't mean it.
It's pro-death. Why don't we just call them pro-death? Because
pro-death activists. They don't mean pro-choice. They're pro-choice if you're talking about choosing to have an abortion, but they're not pro-choice if you're talking about choosing not to have an abortion. They're not pro-choice if you're talking about choosing where your child gets to go to school based on your values and what you want them to be able to achieve after they get out of school. They're not pro-choice if you're talking about your diet or what kind of car you want to drive, whether you want to drive electric or gas-powered. So basically, coal-powered or gas-powered, because electric cars right now are pretty much all coal-powered. They're not that kind of pro-choice, right? They're not talking about pro-choice if you're deciding that you want to get a job that earns a lot more money than other people and you're willing to work for it, and then you want to keep that money and spend it on your family. They don't think you should have that choice. But if you want to kill your baby, they're all for it. And by the way, they think you should lie to your husband about it. So let's take a look. Alright, where'd my sound go? I just played this. Let's try again. Is it turned off? It's not turned off. Let's see what happens here. There we go.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
Did you make the
heck, dang it.
Right choice?
I sure did, honey. Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls.
Yeah, what happens in the booth stays in the booth, except now my co-host can't see this because it's on my screen, but this image that I put here that everybody's looking at has 4 headlines, right, about war in Ukraine. And I remember I mentioned we had 2 fronts in the Middle East, or I'm sorry, the Far East, that we were looking at as well. So at least 2 of those headlines talk about North Korea potentially getting involved in Ukraine and what that means for the United States. Right? So we're looking at women and their safety net addiction becoming the reason why Americans might end up having to fight men from North Korea in Ukraine on behalf of Ukrainians against the interests of Russia. It's like the pie fight from The Great Race, the movie The Great Race, where, like one person throws a pie and it hits another person and it splatters on a third person, and that person throws a pie and hits another person that wasn't involved, and it just that's what is happening with Ukraine right now. And the administration that wants to continue the policies that have led to that and expand them is who they're voting for. They're voting for that to happen in Ukraine. Not because they give a shit about Ukraine, but because they were told that if you are pro-choice, pro-abortion, that you have to vote for Kamala Harris.
Well, that's the only reason that they're voting for her anyway, right? Is because they were told to. It's not because they had an original thought or she presented any kind of skill or exceptional qualities, because of course she hasn't. We've all been watching. No, it's just that's it. That's all he has is I'm a woman, vote for me.
He has my vagina.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. And then, but they beat you over the head with that, right? Like, if you don't vote for her, this woman, because she has a vagina, then you must be a misogynist. It doesn't matter what you are or identify as. You just hate women because you don't like this one. It's ridiculous on the face of it. The Democrats tell you what to do and will berate you every step of the way just to make sure that you fall into the Democratic plantation line. It's the real free thinkers who actually realize that they're not the only game in town. And I'm not even saying that you have to vote for Trump. I mean, God, there are other parties. There are other candidates to vote for. You may not have heard of them because, I mean, let's face it, realistically, it's a uniparty system, but that's a whole other discussion that I won't go down. But, it's like it's one or the other. And if you don't like this one, well, the only line of defense that they have is to call you stupid for not believing in us.
Yeah.
It's such a false it's just a false sense of a choice, right? I don't know.
Or shaming women for not voting for Kamala Harris. And yes, Senior Sticks, you can vote for Donald Duck. You can vote Donald Duck as a write-in candidate. But if you are going to vote for someone other than one of the two major parties or any of the people on the ticket as a protest against not having anyone on the ticket that you like, my recommendation is to take a note from the pages of Brewster's Millions. And if you haven't watched it, you should watch the Richard Pryor version. Brewster's Millions, made in the 80s, I think. Great movie, great point. And just write in none of the above. It's not going to win the election like it did in the movie, but so if spoiler alert, obviously, but if you haven't seen that movie by now, it's been out long enough that it's your own fault. But in any case, that's a great way to get it across, especially if a shitload of people are in that situation where they just don't like anybody on the ticket and they can't bring themselves to vote for the lesser of the two evils they consider likely to win. Then write in none of the above. You get hundreds of people doing that. You get somebody reporting on it, because that would be something that would get somebody's attention. And frankly, it's one of the best movies out there. It's the premise is great, the movie is great. Because it's a feel-good movie from the 80s, what's going to happen when you start watching it, but you don't know how it's going to happen. It's got Richard Pryor in it, but it's not just Richard Pryor. It's also got John Candy. So if you haven't seen it, you really, really should. Because those two were great together. But in any case.
And yeah, North Korea getting involved in a war is just an indication that China is getting involved in it. It's just a shot across the bow. Because North Korea is a vassal state of China and has been since that war they had, since the 50s. Much like Ukraine is a vassal state of the US, or indeed of NATO, or whatever you want to call it. And this is all just an indication that it's basically World War III. And women will vote for this because they don't understand what's going on. They're just told who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, and the good guys are anyone who is not our own country, and the bad guys are our own country. For some reason, women fall for oikophobic propaganda. That's why all this oikophobic propaganda has taken off in the last 100 years. It seems to typically happen during the collapse of an empire, whether it's brought on by the enemies of that empire or it's just an ingrained sort of inevitability of what happens when an empire becomes so self-indulgent that they have no enemies left except their own people. And yeah, and then we get embroiled in wars that have nothing to do with us, because our governments are, I guess, determined to launder money into whatever country they can. That's what most of these fucking laws, these wars are for. They're not real wars. They're just money laundering opportunities. It's not just the US. It's China and Russia and all of these countries run by corrupt assholes. They only do these wars so that they can convince the people of their country to filter all of their taxes into some.
They don't even have to convince them.
Money sink, yeah.
Nope, they just gotta tell them you're gonna do it. Gunpoint.
Yeah, and you know, one of the scariest things that I learned not that long ago was that, back when World War II was going on, like, we didn't call it a world war for a good couple years until after we were into it. It wasn't. They
called it the Great War.
World War. But it wasn't even considered like I don't know if it was globally considered a war. It wasn't called a world war. It was
right.
It took a while for us to get there, so we could even like it feels the way that things are moving and shifting in countries, abroad, and especially with this so important election coming up next week.
Yeah.
The wrong choice could be devastating.
You remember what they called the Vietnam War, by the way? You remember what that was called when we were kids? We got corrected on it all the time. It wasn't the Vietnam War because it was never a war. It was a police action.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh my God. Now that you say it, yes. Oh my God.
Yeah. Thousands of deaths. Thousands of human male deaths from a quote-unquote police action.
Police action.
Yeah. Because, America, Team America, World Police, right?
Yeah. It's dirty. I think the only difference now is that, as time progresses, the speed at which information is transferred has accelerated, right? So,
yeah.
Like we were saying in a couple weeks ago in a show, like when I forgot when the war had stopped. I know I'm fucking killing myself because I can't remember, but it took a while for it got to the other troops in the other areas that the war was finally over and that you could put it down, but people were still dying and fighting.
And that happened. That happened in World War I. It happened in World War II. It happened in Vietnam. Happened in Korea. Probably happened in the wars in the Middle East as well. Although it's information traveling faster now because of electronics. It probably helped with that.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean that's another another casualty, another complication that people just accepted that they were still going to be fighting, there's still going to be people dying until the information gets to them. And even with radio and everything, it didn't right away.
Yeah, and now the problem that we have is not the speed at which information is transferred, it's the legitimacy with which it's transferred, right? Like are they telling us the truth? You know, I don't trust the government. I don't trust the media to actually tell us what's actually going on.
Yeah.
It's
You know how
just
you
different
can
tone.
tell if a government official is lying?
His lips are moving.
He's communicating with you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That's pretty much it. They don't and this is it just made news recently that the Kamala Harris campaign got busted trying to manipulate X's community notes. And that's like one of the last bastions of debate. Not necessarily truth, but debate. And I say that on social media anyway, because, just because somebody corrects what somebody else said doesn't mean that the corrector is right. Obviously, fact-checking doesn't necessarily mean the same thing when it's said by the people of the establishment as it does when it's said by independent journalists. And that makes a big difference, right? Because for the establishment, fact-checking is a dog whistle for politically correcting something. And political correctness, remember, does not mean politeness. It means that which does not contradict the political narrative and the goal of the establishment, the goals of the establishment. So it doesn't matter whether something's true or not. It matters whether something is agreeable with the message of the government. It doesn't matter whether it's right or not. It matters whether it helps to further the goals of the government or whether it hinders the goals of the government. And so when they fact check, they're not checking for facts. They're checking for compatibility. Right? But community notes create a situation where the public can actually look at what the individual originally said, what the community note says, where the information comes from that's contradicting the information the individual gave, the original poster gave, and make up their own mind about it. And they don't have to rely on somebody to tell them what's true and what's not true. They can decide that for themselves. And they can argue with each other about it. And they can even vote the community note not useful if they think that it's not useful. And that should happen organically. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what's interesting to me is what the Harris campaign was accused of doing was organized downvoting of community notes or blocking of community notes in order to manipulate which notes get left up and seen by the public and which notes come down or are not seen by the public or are not believed by the public. If a lot of people vote it not helpful, it's the public looks at it and says, well, maybe it's not good information. And if the Trump campaign had done that while the Harris campaign's administration was in power, you can bet there would be an investigation, a prosecution, a conviction, and heavy punishment, all in short order. We'd be hearing about every person from that Discord getting arrested. We'd be hearing about every person from that Discord having connections that were questionable and those people being questioned and those people being possibly arrested as well, and the candidate would be disqualified and there would be a hearing and potentially, this would be looked at as election interference and so on, all the things that are implied with that.
Yeah, as very well as it should be.
It shouldn't be, but it shouldn't be happening to him or her. It should be something that everybody has the right to ask those questions. It should be transparent. Right. It should be done in public. And when someone gets manipulative about it, the criticism that she's facing for it now is right.
Yeah, and to your point, yes, if Donald Trump's campaign had done this, he would have been excoriated. Whereas I'm just learning that this is happening right now as you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
They did what?
They had a Discord to organize this. So
holy shit.
When you see a community note on Twitter, you can, after you read the community note, you can rate whether or not it was helpful. You can rate what you liked about it. And I guess you can decide whether or not you want to continue personally to be able to see it. And, I never eliminate those. There's been some stuff I've commented on where it's come back later and told me, there was a community note posted under a post that you commented on, and more than half the time, most of the time actually, the community note was kind of similar to what I posted, because a lot of times it's posts I argued with. But a couple of times there have been things that I've responded to that I've been like, if this is true, this is really bad. Are you sure you've confirmed this? Or, before I want to go on and say anything else, because holy shit. And then the community note comes along like, oh, that wasn't in the location that you're saying it was in. It was in this other location, and it wasn't the same people and the same event.
Your princess is in another castle.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to identify that stuff without the kind of dedication that people put toward the creation of their community notes. So some people miss that detail, and it's good to have those, right? But yeah, in my opinion, it's not fine that the Harris campaign did that. It is fine that the capability exists. It's important that when somebody does engage in that, it gets detected and outed, and everybody can judge them for it. Because that's something that it should be affecting your vote. If you're voting for Kamala Harris and you discover that she did this, she's trying to manipulate this, you might want to consider the information that you're basing your vote on might be fake. It might not be true, right? Because she's trying to cover up information that's true because it doesn't jibe with her party's narratives and her establishment goals. So, but yeah, when we look at this and all of this information that we've been looking at, and all of this, the history of how the United States bureaucracy has systematically exploited and murdered men all over the world, and you consider how that bureaucracy got put into place, because as again, going back to the way Gen X grew up, we were always told or taught to think of our government and our military, if not as the world police, as the saviors from the bad guys, right? The world vigilantes. And what we're learning now is that in the name of that vigilantism, that bureaucracy has been pretty much the equivalent of Hitler. Worse, the equivalent of Hitler and Stalin. Alright. OBS is doing something weird, so I'm watching the chat on my other computer and my other screen. So if we are still live and you can still hear the show and everything, let me know, because it actually kind of looks like OBS just dumped Restream and stopped. It dumped its connection to Restream because the chat that I have on OBS just disappeared.
I can confirm we're still on YouTube.
Yeah, I can't either. The computer that I'm watching it on Like, I honestly... Oh, good. The show's still live. Art Force says the show's still live. This is really creepy in my opinion. Okay. Good. It's just something weird that happened with OBS. But why is it that we have smooth sailing for months and months and months, joking about the technical difficulties and all that stuff, right? And then the minute we talk about something like this, all of a sudden I start having all kinds of problems with my app that I'm using and my internet connection and my computer wanting to forced update and all kinds of other stuff. If I wasn't creeped out by it last week and the week before, this pattern is getting fucking weird, guys. Happy Halloween. I'm not liking that. This is not my idea of a good Halloween scare. This is a bad Halloween scare. Okay, so there are some other things that I want to go over here, and just see if I can find the original post. So, of course, it's going to take a second. Let me look down here. Mike Benz posted this, and it's reloading. Because, of course, it has to reload. Because I was on another tab. Computer can't handle me being on another tab. Good fucking grief. This isn't even an old computer. Sigh. So, he's going to talk a little bit more here. There's 3 spots I'm going to try to play. So we have 2051, which is about where I am now. And that's the deep visa scams, which we've already heard about, but this is another area where he's talking about it. And again,
on the visa and the passport stuff this guy was involved in.
Ignore the music in the background.
And I want to trace it back a little bit to 9/11 and an individual named Michael Springman. And I want to listen to... We're listening to Daft Punk Alive 2007. It gets better. You have to just... Let me know if this is a little loud. I'll turn down. So I want to trace it back to the... So that you guys have some, like, visibility. Oh, my God. He was in an Azov propaganda film? Of course he was. What is the noise here? Here, I'll wait for it to come back on. Okay. Sorry, there's a long build-up for this album. But there's a big history of these illegal visa scams in funding terrorist activity and these strange deniable links that this guy, Ryan, seems to be carrying on the legacy of. So, do we start with that? Maybe we start with that, actually. Who in the chat is familiar with Michael Springman and 9/11 and his book called Visas for Terrorists? Anyone know that story?
So this is another one, all right? I still can visualize where I was standing, what I was doing, what I saw around me, and remember what I was thinking when I found out about the 9/11 attack. And it was one of those moments, because I was a parent already. You know, so the first thing I thought of is a war just started. I was a young parent. My brother was just at the top age of where, you know, if you haven't registered for the draft, you can't anymore. So he had to have registered for the draft by then. And I had all these things going on in my head about, you know, where's this going to go? What's going to happen? Because, you know, I've told you guys probably way too many times that I have weird nightmares. And I always have had weird nightmares. And something similar to that was the start of something horrible in a series of them. that I almost wrote about and then didn't. And I immediately started thinking, before we learned the causes and everything, that this was it. We were going to war with China. And like the whole series of things that I had nightmares about, was going to come true, and it was really awful because, some of them were just unbelievably hell-bent. And so when I heard this part of what he had to say, and the manipulation that took place and everything, once again, like I said, it's heartbreaking to learn that my country is not the country that I grew up in. But it's angering and enraging more than anything. And this is why. Let's see if he'll talk.
They call it progress.
Yeah. There we go.
The Michael Springman story.
And we're expected to just
let's first
just go along with this idea that it's progress.
Yeah.
That the country you grew up in is no longer the country you're living in. Well, that's what you can expect from progress.
Yeah.
Things change.
Except
it's got to be good that things are changing, right?
It's not change. It's the fact that so many things turned out to be lies. It's nothing changed except the fact that now we know they were lying. Which, it's better to know, but it doesn't feel better. Anyway, let me see if I can get this.
Let me first go through some receipts on the visas that stood out to me, because I want to start there and then work my way out. Because from the DMs people sent me and the tweets that I've just seen on this very briefly, like, that visa shit is a huge, huge red flag. Okay, so let me just pull this up. So this is from Ryan on his Facebook page. Soldiers, we are working on getting invitation letters from Ukraine and a path, but soldiers must be able to apply for their own visas and pay for all travel and expenses. Okay. Then I saw, we currently need Afghan Special Forces soldiers that can speak perfect English. Afghan Special Forces soldiers.
So again, like this recruiting that's taking place. Now he's not looking at ISIS. Now he's looking at Afghan Special Forces. So these are the guys that, to my understanding, these are the guys that were on the side America was supporting in the Afghan war. So they're playing both sides of the fence there. And again, he's asking them to hand over their information to this number that he's posted, and just this random, information that they might not have had already. Can you imagine seeing a post like that and then sending your personally identifying information? Like, just me personally with all the ID theft warnings and everything. Hell no, right? But this guy apparently expects to have enough trust from Special Forces soldiers from Afghanistan to get them to do that just by posting this number.
You know what it sounds like to me?
What's it sound like?
It sounds like the three-letter agencies were using him long before the attempt on Trump. And because, first of all, who is dumb enough to do that, right? Like, who would just randomly give a stranger your information and pay for the privilege of arming themselves? You know what I mean? It sounds exactly like a FBI CIA honeypot.
Yeah, or this is how they get mercenaries to do their work.
Yeah.
And one of two things is true, right? either they're trying to trap people that are gullible enough to do this, or this guy has built up enough trust within these communities, right, within these circles of mercenary soldiers, that they know or expect that if they follow his instructions, the results will be what they want. Like this paycheck that they're looking for, that they'll get their information back, that nobody's going to steal their identities, that they won't be killed somewhere and then framed for something, or they're so desperate that it's worth the risk to them.
Mm.
And it could be a combination of any of those three things. Any or all.
Construction worker, my ass. This is probably one of these John Hull type situations where he's a construction worker because he's building homes for the fucking CIA fighters and refugees being trafficked by the Defense Department and the CIA.
And see, I'm glad he finally used that word.
Mm.
Because that is what we have been describing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is human trafficking. Who's doing it?
The government.
Right. The United States federal bureaucracy is doing it. Human trafficking of men around the world for death. For death and to commit murder. That's pretty heavy. That's beyond heavy. Like, if you're not outraged by now by this, you're not listening.
You're not paying attention, exactly.
Yeah. And this has been going on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've talked for months about the 800-year-long process through which men built modern Western civilization, right? Through which men built the modern Western democratic process, the voting franchise, the parliamentary system, the representative republic parliamentary system. And that during that time, what did women build? The biggest and most powerful and most corrupt human trafficking organization in the world.
Mm-hmm.
By accident, because it promised them that it would protect their right to kill their babies before birth.
Accident my ass, by the way.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know if women considered this aspect of it. I don't know if women paid attention to this. They were so hell-bent, so focused, laser focused on that one thing. We want to kill our babies. That I don't think they cared what else the government was doing. As long as it didn't impact them directly. They weren't going to get drafted. They weren't getting trafficked by it. They weren't getting threatened to shut up about it. They weren't getting taken from their homes and sent to war. They weren't getting solicited in their most desperate moments to become cannon fodder or exploding messengers or contract killers. Nope, that was only happening to men, so it didn't matter to them. Right? Give us our welfare money, give us our abortion, give us our social safety nets, give us our laws that prevent our husbands from getting custody of our children if we divorce them, even if we were the ones cheating. give us our laws that protect us from accountability if we commit abuse, but gives us the power to use abuse allegations to wreck his life. And we won't even look into your background. We won't even look into your backdoor activities. We won't even look into what's going on in the back room, as long as you keep us out of the back alley. I don't feel sorry for women in this. I don't feel sorry for women that are complaining about MGTOW. I don't feel sorry for women that are complaining about not being mentored in the workplace. I don't feel sorry for women that are complaining about not being able to find a husband or a boyfriend. Right? I don't feel sorry for any of y'all.
Nope, not even a little bit. Not even a little bit, ladies.
You stole Seymour's blood and you fed the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it has taken over the country. And who is going to stop it? Like, who is fighting to stop it? Not the woman who was running for president. Nope. Only a man would do that. Right? Only a man would, against his own financial interest, not once, but twice, risking his life the second time, run for an office that a type of office he's never held before, by the way. Yeah, he's been in executive positions, but not over government. Not where he had to deal with other branches of government. Right? Only a guy would do that. Only a man would do that. Women are not doing that.
Mm-mm.
Only a man looks at the social safety nets and the complex, tangled web of strangleholds that it has on the country and says, I'm going to piss that whole thing off in order to pare it down. Like, only a man walks into that ever-growing shrubbery of thorny waste with little to no shield and starts clipping. Women don't have the constitution for that. Literally or figuratively. And they've proven it time and again. They don't have the ethics for that. Even a man who can be viewed as unethical in other aspects of his life is more ethical than women in that respect. So, yeah, this has been one hell of a ride getting this information. Next we'll look at 3007. Oops, wrong tab. There we go. So
yeah, get it all.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. We'll go start at 29 here, because it's going to be quiet for a second anyway.
On the visas thing. So let me just move through my list here. We are going to get to the Michael Springman thing in a second. Actually, let's do that. Let's do that now. Let me start with this article right here. This is what immediately came to mind. So we're just going to start in one place and then branch out, and you'll learn something new if you're not familiar with this. Okay, Justice Integrity Project. Shocking new book links illicit visas to terrorists' current wars. A former State Department Foreign Service officer's new book. Here, let me zoom enhance. So former State Department Foreign Service officer's new book provides a shocking, timely, incredible circumstantial case that ties the training of Islamic radicals. Hey, you mean like Afghan special forces fleeing the Taliban? To our nation's major foreign policy disasters in the Middle East during the past quarter century. The book is Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA handouts that rocked the world, an insider view. Is the author.
Yeah. So when people are like, "Oh, this is Russian propaganda," this is Russian. No, it's not. It is documented information that has been known for a while that just simply isn't widely reported on. Again, I have to emphasize this. All right. Why is this so scary to me? As a former newspaper journalist for, small town, but still established in a small town newspaper, even though most of my work was just photojournalism and everything, the fact that this scoop existed and the mainstream media buried it, because when the media ignores something, it's not an accident. The mainstream media, the establishment media, the elite media, right? What they like to call the legacy media. We didn't hear about this from them. We hear about this from independent journalists. That's just absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Like how, and it's always known, that the establishment media lied, that you couldn't trust what they had to say, right? And the opposing establishment media lies just as much, and you can't trust what they say. You can't trust what they don't say either, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that worldwide this didn't come out from some outlet and just take the public by storm. Look at this information. This is huge. The United States federal bureaucracy spent this long engaging in human trafficking in the world, and nobody framed it that way. Nobody discussed it that way. Nobody opened the door to this nasty back room and showed all of the shit that was going on and drew the public's attention to it and rubbed people's noses in it and said, this is what you're paying for. Nobody did that. The only reason to not do that is either if you're afraid of what the consequences might be if you do, or if you're in on it, if you're invested in it somehow.
Yeah.
Those are your two choices. Which is it? Establishment media. Was it fear or was it investment? Are you invested in the power structure that was involved? Because if you are, you're worthless. If you're afraid of the power structure that was involved, you're just as worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's legitimate to suspect that at least some of them didn't say anything because of fear, because look what happened to Julian Assange.
Right.
Yeah. Not even Carlin, who was against euphemisms called conscription, is human trafficking. Well, I do. What else can you call it? It's involuntary servitude, right? It's indentured servitude because you have a period of time once you're conscripted that you are in. You don't get released when, if the war goes on and on, you don't get released until your period of time that you are forced to serve is up.
Yeah.
And you can be recalled,
Yeah.
You don't get to just say no for any reason that you want.
They pretty much own you.
Yeah. That is. What else would you call that? Like I said in the video, we have to talk about scare quotes male violence. Violence is labor. It involves physical exertion. It is risky. It involves emotional exertion. And there are consequences for it. It is labor. You are using your labor when you use violence. And if somebody takes that away from you by force, the choice whether or not to use that labor, that's slavery, isn't it? Like, is that a debt that you owe just because you were born with a dick?
Apparently so. Ask a feminist. They will say yes every single time.
You know, Like, but if you suggest to them that giving birth is a debt that they owe because they were born with a vagina, they would, the howling would never stop.
No.
You'd need cochlear ear implants. You'd need something to restore your hearing. The banshees would never shut up.
No.
And yeah, men can still be drafted in their 40s. I know women in their 40s that can't walk uphill. Like, they kind of stumble. Men in their 40s can still be... Men who are intellectually disabled can still be drafted.
Yeah.
Men who are deemed unable to support themselves through gainful employment because of their disabilities can still be drafted. And the entity that wants to send them to war gets to decide if their disability makes them incapable of going to war. And I know during the Vietnam War, the standards were relaxed for a lot of different types of disabilities. Not just intellectual, but physical as well. And mental health disabilities as well. So this idea that, it's about you being able-bodied and about, defending your country and all, it all goes out the window. Everything that we have been told as a generation, we shouldn't be telling our children that. We shouldn't let our children tell their grandchildren that. Right? It is not men's responsibility to be trafficked all over the world, to use their labor, the harshest labor that men can be forced to use, for somebody else's financial benefit, to nobody's advantage in life, without any choice in the matter themselves. And there is no amount of compensation that is just compensation for that. So I can't even say without just compensation, because that's not something that can be done. It doesn't exist. There's not a paycheck big enough to make that okay.
No.
And the payoff isn't your freedom. It isn't even a concept that's very important. Right? The payoff is just somebody else's paycheck. Men spent 800 years building the most remarkable system for ensuring that if we are going to have a system of government, the average person, the not wealthy citizen, the poor citizen, the middle income citizen, the high income citizen, all would be represented by it. 800 years of blood and pain and death to create and defend that system. And women's votes turned it into a monster that eats men. Y'all wonder why I'm black-pilled. I just wonder why I still want to identify as a woman. Yeah, besides the fact that I was born this way.
It's kind of difficult. I mean, I regularly will refer to myself in the third person or separate myself from the group of women, right? Because I don't recognize the way these people think and act. It's just so inhuman.
It is, and it's scary, but it's enraging and heartbreaking more. And the thing the little white spark on the top of my black pill is that if I can get upset about it, and I'm a woman, that means women can do better than they are doing. Yeah. They can be better than they are being. And they need a push. And making women understand what this is that they've put together, what this is that they've built with their votes, and why it has to go. What's so important about getting rid of it? What's so wrong about the safety net addiction culture that we have in Western civilization? Is a pretty important goal to have. It's not going to happen quickly. The Overton window is probably the biggest, heaviest social structure we have. But it can. And so that's my goal. You know, like, my activism as a men's rights activism isn't just going to court with falsely accused men. It's not just sharing information so people can make decisions in their lives with all of the information instead of a bunch of lies. It's also pushing women to get up off their asses and start getting good at being human. Because somewhere along the line, somewhere in the baby boomer generation, we forgot. And so it's on those of us that are here shouting about it, even though there's a lot of women who are intensely frustrating when we talk to them. You know, a lot of us have the ability to push them to think and to push them to self-examine and to push them to change their minds about some things, take some risks. Get good at being human. Grow up and stop supporting this shit because it's going to kill your children. And turning this ship around is going to take a lot of work. President Trump's the first step on a very long journey that's going to be very hard. It's going to go through very rough terrain that a lot of people aren't ready to deal with. Women need to be ready for it because we are out of shape. And Packard, yes, we played that a few minutes. Well, it's several minutes ago, but yeah, we played it and we were talking about it. Right? That's part of what I wanted to get across here. This shit exists because women are too single-minded about I want. Give me. They don't have the big picture in mind. They don't have the economic structure, the political structure, the military structure, the educational structure, the community structure, the food structure, the transport structure. They don't have any of those things in mind. They're just demanding no interference with this one thing. And we will sacrifice all of those other things to protect the right to kill our babies.
And yes, it's important that you specified all those things, and that you didn't just leave it at be a good human. Because unfortunately, that's the same thing that these demonic feminists will say about us. You're just not a good person. You're just not being a good human, and it's a very childish argument. And although you'll touched on earlier, you're able to go beyond it and actually explain the difference between being helpful and being unhelpful. So I hope everyone remembers that, because I mentioned towards the top of the show that I consider myself a terrible person, but most men are better people than me. I only say that for rhetorical effect. There's really no such thing as a good person or a good human being. I mean, anyone, even a total psychopath who will absolutely fuck everyone over, is still a human being. It's an unfortunate conclusion, but you know, a human being is simply a human being. It doesn't matter how psychopathic you are. You're still a human being. That's not how you should judge anyone, because that's not going to get anyone anywhere. Because it's just a rhetorical device that can be used by either side of any argument, by every side of every argument forever. And it's that kind of reductiveness that sort of makes it impossible to have these arguments. The point is, how do you create a better world? How do you develop actual empathy? And this is a set of lasers that I'm trying to step over, because our enemies will also say you need to have empathy, but what they mean by that is you need to give me what I want. But it's not about that. It's about doing what's right, not necessarily for everyone, but for the people in your vicinity. It's there are other people out there who aren't interested in any of the humanitarian principles that we consider important.
I'll give you a good real-life example. Driving your vehicle at an insane breakneck speed in city traffic. And people think of it as, well, you know, you're talking about obeying the law because it's the law. No. I don't care what the legal speed limit is. My question is, are you choosing to risk other people's lives by the way that you're driving differently than everybody else on the road? And what right do you think you have to do that? What makes it more important that you get to drive at that speed than it is that they get where they're going alive? It is good to consider that question and act accordingly. It is selfish and evil to consider that question and then say, but my rights, and then take that risk and not care if you do harm to another person, because you're now imposing on someone else a risk that they did not choose to take.
It's like the supermarket trolley issue. Yes, you do have the right to just fling the supermarket trolley across the parking lot. And maybe we shouldn't have the right to force you to put it where the fuck the supermarket trolleys are supposed to go. But we can get a pretty good idea of how we should judge you as a person, as to if you put the supermarket trolley back in the place it's supposed to go, or if you just fling it across the car park. Right. Elon only recently discovered this. He only recently posted that green text on Twitter. Yeah. Did you see it?
Yes.
Oh, well done, Elon. You're finally getting on board with what we were talking about 4 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the trolley problem, and not the should you kill these 5 people instead of this one person trolley problem. It's the basic trolley problem of should you govern yourself even in the event that you are ungoverned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If there was no speed limit, it would still behoove you to look around at the traffic and act accordingly. If there was some sort of social standard in place where everybody else on the road is below a certain speed, especially, you know, in a crowded situation where there are multiple cars on the road, then you should do the same. Not because it's just important to conform, or because there's some law and people's judgment of good and evil is important, but because you don't want to hurt anyone. And you don't feel entitled to impose risk on other people without their consent. Right? Most people can understand that. There's a percentage of people that don't understand that, and they spend a lot of money not understanding that because we have a system that fines them for it. But based on how women vote, there's a lot more women that don't understand that than men. Because women will vote for a system like this, knowing that weak leadership increases the risk that our nation will get involved in a war. They will vote knowing that the wars that we're involved in now happened from one side of the political fence. They will vote knowing that the uniparty that they're voting for on either side is really all on one side of the political fence, even if they claim to be on both sides, on opposite sides. But if you look at even small L libertarians, women are rare among them, right? Because they will not even agree to risk not being able to steal your money in order to avoid forcing you to risk having to go to war. But with that said, like I said, we have got to get it across to women our age and younger. You know, what's this leading to?
Yeah.
World War after World War. If you even care about the men in your lives, even if you don't care about all the rest of the men in the world, if you at least care about your brother, your husband, your son, your father, the men that you work with, the men that you are friends with, just that small set of men, forget about abortion for a minute and consider the leadership that you are voting for. And instead of fighting for a world that is ruled by an iron authoritarian government, consider fighting for a world where authoritarianism isn't the way that things get accomplished, where military power isn't the way things get accomplished. And in that world, you can fight for a system in which laws are not how abortion gets addressed, but education is. And young women may be able to avoid having to make the choice altogether without having a system that tells them whether they make that choice or not, or how to make it. They would have control over it themselves. My opinion is that well-educated young women would make the choice to avoid conception, and you wouldn't have this debate. You know, I know a lot of women will argue that that choice fails all the time. I don't think it will. And I think that if you go the authoritarian route, you're wasting an opportunity to make the next generations more capable, more accountable, and more successful in every other aspect of their lives. And you're wasting that opportunity at the expense of men's lives. So I would like to see women step up, do better, fight for more independence, more wisdom, and more intelligence in our decision making, and turn this ship around before it goes off the edge.
Never gonna happen. It's just never gonna fucking happen. Too many women are just caught up in this narcissistic way of thinking, right? It's if it doesn't directly affect them and their lives in the immediate present, then they don't care. They do not care. They will not care. I don't know. I don't have much high hopes for women.
I'm seeing exactly what you're saying. You know, I'm seeing it on Twitter, X. I'm seeing it on Facebook. I'm seeing it on the news, any place that women have conversations. I try not to watch The View because I hate migraines.
Oh God.
I don't like feeling like somebody hit me in the back of the head with a hammer. So
yeah.
But like I said, maybe a big black pill, but there's a little spark of hope. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, fuck them. Far too many people are like, no, men need to change. Men need to save
man
women.
up.
Men need to man up and save women from this hideous ideology that's affected them. And I'm like, we've been trying to save women.
Well, there's only one way to save an addict.
Very fucking long time since the original days of romantic chivalry, and I'm like, if we're just gonna keep trying to save them, then it's not gonna work.
Yeah, there's only one way to save an addict. You can't. You stop condoning the behavior, and the addict has to decide whether or not to save themselves.
Yeah, so fuck them. Let's change the system. If anything, women should be saving us from themselves.
Yeah.
And if they won't, fuck them. They can fuck off and die. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Yep. But
if
yeah,
we,
that's
and
the only thing about men that really needs to change is that tolerance. Men need to stop being so tolerant of such reprehensible behavior from women. That's it. Everything else is fine. Like, I don't know. Can I be any more clear? Men aren't bad.
I mean, women seem to go along with things.
Yeah.
So we just need to change things. And if we change the things so that women have to fucking make an effort, then they'll do that.
That's true.
So,
women do have to.
They say we can't change women because women will just adhere to the system. Well, let's change the system, and then women will change, right?
That sounds plausible. Women really don't have any choice in the matter at that point. If the system does not cater to them being lazy, stupid assholes, then they'll have to stop being lazy, stupid assholes. And that makes sense to me. But
women can join us in changing the system. I mean, they're not all the same. I'm talking to two of you who are quite on board with what I'm saying.
Yep.
And maybe that's not as rare as it looks. It just seems that way because so many women get all their information from the fucking government.
Well, and it's also because I think all of the women who are absolute psychopaths find their way to social media because that's where they're going to get the most attention. And they don't care if it's negative or positive. They just want the attention. So, yes, exactly, Night Motorcyclist. Society needs a harsh lesson. And I hate to say it, but nobody needs that more than women. That's why I say I don't, like I said yesterday, I don't see Trump as the solution. I see Trump as a step. We are the solution. Not we as in Honey Badger Radio or we as in the men's rights movement, but we as in the people of each country. That without our action, our vigilance, our continued pushing and pushing, both on the Overton window and the bits of the system that need to come off and disappear, it won't matter who we elect. We could elect Jesus. Jesus could come back and we could elect him to be president of the United States and nothing would change if the people don't remain vigilant and don't support that change. Like, he could perform miracle after miracle, and the rest of the government would be like, yeah, that's nice, we're going to do this terrible thing in the background while the news isn't reporting on us, and you're the distraction. Like, that's what would happen.
We're going to give another $1 billion to Israel.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jesus. If you don't support Israel, fuck you.
There we go. So as long as they don't give $1 billion to Rome. That might upset him a bit. I told you before, those guys aren't very nice. But in any case, yeah. This is basically it. It's us. You are the last resort. The last bastion of truth. The last bastion of freedom. There's not a politician that's going to save your ass. What we want from Trump, that is Trump voters. Not we the men's rights movement or we at Honey Badger Radio, but we the Trump voters, those of us who are openly discussing our voting, is we want him to pare down the bureaucracy, this monster that we've been talking about, right? So that the terrible things that it is doing will become harder to hide and harder to do. And so that we can start tearing down more and more of the bureaucracy and keep it, if we have to have government, to keep it in the hands of people that can't escape accountability. That's what we want. And that's only a start, because where does that accountability come from? It's not fate. It's not the media. It's not the rest of the politicians. It's not other parts of the bureaucracy. It's you and me. We are the accountability. And so, yeah, you're right. Trump's not the solution. He is a start. So that is what has to happen. And hopefully it will. I'm asking for something terrible in order to stop something even worse. And with that, we will end the show because it's almost 9 o'clock, and this is a work night for me, and I still have an after show to do. So I'll see if I want to try to go over what is the third part of this. We probably have. I'll look at this when I'm at work tonight. I don't know that we need to listen to more of this. We might go back to suffrage next week. I'll see. It's partly, I guess, going to depend on what the election results are, too. Because obviously, we may have other things to cover. But I still do have some conclusions to bring up with regard to suffrage. So, because there's more history. Like, we stopped. We didn't even finish the 20th century. Like, we didn't get to. I don't think we even got to Canada becoming a country, or Australia becoming a country. So we'll still have those things to talk about as well. And I still have that timeline going, so there is also that. In the meantime, thanks everybody for listening. This was a doom sausage from hell, right? But it's something that, as hard as it is to swallow and as hard as it is to digest, it's necessary. And
blood sausage sounds awful, but it's actually quite nutritious.
There we go. Thanks to two of you for trudging through this with me. And thanks everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all. We will see you next Thursday.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.